The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject.
Welcome back to another episode of The Things We All Carry. I got up early. Well, I didn't get up early. I wake up early nearly every day, and today was no exception. So I decided to do my intro early, kind of enjoy the sunrises coming up over my shoulder there. Hot coffee, sunrise, introduction to the show. Seems like a natural combination. This episode is one that I think is important, and I think it's important for veterans to listen to, cops to listen to, firefighters to listen to, people that are experiencing trauma on a daily basis, like those professions, these frontline folks, dispatchers, whoever you are. You're experiencing these traumas, and they're coming at you whenever and all the time, basically. And I think we need every tool in our arsenal to recover. We need every tool to help us process what we've seen, process what we've been through, and not just what we've been through, but what in some cases, what we failed to go through. You know, some of us beat ourselves up so badly for what we failed to do, which isn't necessarily the case, because as long as you're doing your job and you're doing what you're trained to do, you've done what you're supposed to do. Sometimes the outcome doesn't work out in their favor or the patient's favor or whatever. And you can't put that on you. All you can do is do your job to the best of your ability. And I got to tell you, things started to change for me a little bit when I started to subscribe to that theory. Do your job the way you know you're supposed to do. Things will fall where they're supposed to fall. I know it might sound a little woo-woo at times, but and I'm not a religious person. I don't subscribe to religion. I don't subscribe to any of it. But when you do your job and you say, hey, I did everything I could do, that's the best you can do. And sometimes it's hard to accept. So, little tangent there, just share with you what I've learned over the years. I don't know how to kind of intro the show a little bit. I guess it is to talk about a personal experience. And to be honest with you, my personal experience with psychedelics began in high school, which is probably a little too early. I remember talking about ecstasy and LSD, and I remember thinking, well, these are fascinating chemicals, and what they can do to the brain, and what you can, wasn't a matter of what you could learn from anything at that point. It was just, where can you go with this? And I did a lot of reading. I did reading on the science of the day. I did some reading with people like Hunter S. Thompson, Carlos Castanedas, and many other authors that are escaping me as I speak. And I knew that there was something of value there, but as a 18-year-old kid, I was a little nervous, a little scared to try these things. I did do it a couple of times in high school. It was never the effect that I thought it was going to be. It was probably because I didn't have any idea what I was doing. Turns out that's exactly why. I had no idea what I was doing. And through my adult years, I've played with it a little bit, and I've known that it's a tool that needs to be in everybody's toolbox. And I hate that saying, but it's true. It needs to be in everybody's toolbox. We get stuck in these patterns of thinking because of trauma and PTSD or anxiety or depression or whatever it is. We get stuck. And I've talked to a few people, and it's like the ski ruts. You're skiing downhill and you're stuck in these ruts, but you see something's in your way. You know something's in your way, and you're about to hit it, but you can't get out because you're stuck in a rut. Guess what? Our brains from trauma are doing the same thing. We get stuck in patterns and we can't get out. We know we don't want to be there, and we know that we're leading ourselves to some sort of a disaster, but we can't get out. And, it's last week's show with Jim talking about his brain scan and how his brain is still in fight or flight because it's stuck there. It is what trauma has done to his brain. And so he's retooling and retraining that brain. This week, we're talking about just another tool to retrain your brain and to open up pathways and to kind of like take steal a phrase from hockey, use a Zamboni and smooth that out. And now every path is available. It's been fascinating to me how these shows have tied together in the last few weeks, where I haven't released my episode with Dr. Brooke Barley yet, but it was excuse me, it's probably one I should have released first, because she does talk about, all the pieces of the brain and how they interact with each other and what needs to happen before you can have true change. But these people are all talking about one thing, and they're talking about change and improvement and making yourself better. And I don't think we should limit ourselves to one or two things to make ourselves better. I don't think we can get better from one or two things. And so that's why I preach these multidiscipline, multifaceted approaches. Talk therapy is great. It helps me. Yeah, it does. But you know what also helps me? A microdose, or smoking a joint once in a while, or an edible, or a dose of mushrooms. Those are very powerful tools, and they help you get out of these ruts. And these ruts are dangerous. They are stupid dangerous. Once you get in a rut and you get set in it, you don't think there's any escape. And the next thing you know, you're starting ideations and considering suicide. We need to prevent that from happening. And a spectrum of treatments is in my opinion, what the key is to do that. A spectrum of treatments, from talk therapy to psychedelics, to EEGs, to brain scans, to EMDR, to desensitization, whatever you name it, we have to run the gamut. And then we have to add in the prevention that I keep talking about, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, ice baths, saunas, working out, eating right, not drinking. All of that stuff comes together. And that's where we start to see, hey, we can start to make a difference. It's small things lead to bigger things lead to better things. And we need to take advantage of every tool that's at our fingertips. Thankfully, the government is coming around, and these tests are being completed, and the data is proving out that these are valuable tools, and we need to take advantage of them. So without further ado, welcome to episode 127, I believe, of The Things We All Carry. This one is with Matt Zemon. Matt Zemon is an interesting dude. His whole gig is psychedelics. He has a book out about psychedelics. He has a journal out about psychedelics. He's got a new one coming out about veterans and the use of psychedelics. He is an advocate for the use of psychedelics in a very controlled manner, in a therapeutic setting. We get into kind of run the gamut of psychedelics, and this is a really good introduction or primer for people who have never been exposed to it. This will give you like the building blocks of what psychedelics are, what we can use them for, what each one is like, and then moving forward, how to pursue and how to seek it out and how to use it. I'm very happy to bring this one to you. I hope that everybody listens with an open mind. I hope that you come away and you at least come away considering, maybe this is an option for me. And if you have questions, you have more questions, as Matt says in the end of the episode, reach out to him, reach out to me. I'll answer whatever I can. And if I can't answer it, I'll reach out to Matt, or I'll reach out to whoever else I know who might be an expert on psychedelics. There's a lot of questions, and we're trying to answer a number of them in this episode. I know I didn't get to all of them. I know Matt didn't get to all of them. So if you have more questions, like I said, you need to reach out. Let's talk about it. I'm not saying go out and get high or take a trip tomorrow, but open your mind to it a little bit. Listen to it. See what he has to say. Understand that these are tools that can help all of us. You guys, again, let me know what you think about the show. If you have questions about the topic, or you have questions about the show in general, or life, or fire department, or retirement, whatever it is, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here. I'm open to questions. I'm open to criticism. As I've always said, that sun is coming up. It's going to be nice. It's going to be a nice day. I'm excited. So sit back, listen, enjoy, and let me know what you think. Hit me up with whatever questions you have. Get outside, do something for yourself. When I do it, There we go. Um, yeah, so I guess I can reiterate what we were just saying, that waste
Yeah,
the
that
good
sounds good.
stuff before we hit record.
Mhm.
Well, I was just saying that I wanted to give a nod out to John from Rescue One CBD, whose shirt I'm wearing. It says Black Sheep Italian, because it's something as simple as CBD, which has no effect on cognitive abilities. It has no psychedelic effect. It has no, you don't get a high from CBD. But he's considered kind of this black sheep because he's professing the wonders of CBD, when here you and I are gonna talk about psychedelics, and I'm thinking, well, how is that gonna be received? Because people are so resistant to talk about it, or so resistant to hear about it, or accept that this is a viable form of therapy that can be used, a viable form of medication that can be used for many of the things that first responders are experiencing after calls. Um,
Yeah, I mean, Stack, we have 50 years of prohibition and false information that is all that we grew
yeah,
up with. So it's understandable that people are going to be resistant and hesitant. And yeah, I mean, this completely goes against the Just Say No and the DARE
right.
programs and the things that were part of our childhood. So we have some educating to do. But I'm hoping in this conversation today that we can cover a lot of ground and talk about kind of demystify this, talk about how to reduce risk, talk about legality, all those types of things.
Yeah, and I have a working knowledge of psychedelics, and I have a very layman's, experience with psychedelics. Uh, I'm lucky to have DC just north of me, where it's decriminalized, and you can go and you can gift it. You can go pay for
Hmm.
whatever it is, and you get, they pretty much it's just mushrooms, but, I know a couple of the stores sell DMT as well. Um, but the rest of this country, other than pockets, don't have any access to it. And so it is such a mysterious thing to Americans in general, like you said, because of the narrative that's been sold for over 50 years, not to include, the narrative that led up to that, to the ban in 50 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, for most of us, for everybody in the country, the only legal option today in all 50 states is ketamine, and it's prescribed off label. Um, it is technically a dissociative anesthetic. It's not technically a psychedelic or not a classic psychedelic, but it has many behaviors and features that are similar. And then for those in states like Colorado and Oregon, or in specific cities, like you talked about DC or Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there's a number of cities that have decriminalized some of these psychedelics. Um, there's some options, but for many people, it's challenging to get access.
You know what's happening here? I'm hearing you through my computer, not my headphones. That's weird. That's where I'm getting the issue from. So it's good. So your volume is good. It's my headset that's not good. I
Well, good.
apologize,
Makes me
sir.
feel better then.
Um,
No,
well,
no,
let me
no,
do
Stack. It's
before
all
we go
good.
too much further, let me do a brief introduction. Let me also make sure that how much time that we have to talk today. And I know I book for 2 hours, but not everybody always has 2 hours to give.
Yeah, if we could do an hour,
That'd
that
be
would be
perfect.
amazing.
So, and you're the professional.
Awesome.
You have all the speaking points, and so I'm kind of, I feel like I might be along for a ride here, and I'll fit in where I fit in. Um,
A stack where you fit in is the questions that you're curious about, and we can go any direction you want, but you know what your audience is listening for. And if we just have a genuine conversation about those items, we're gonna do good work
well, let's
together.
start with this. I'll let the people know who they're listening to, and then you can give a little brief history of yourself. And I just want to say that this book that I've been reading lately, that is
Mm.
yours, the Psychedelics for Everyone, has been fantastic. It's a great compilation of writings and information, and I think it's a valuable tool for anybody. And for everybody listening right now, my guest today is Matt Zemon. And Matt, and did I pronounce that right, Matt? I apologize.
You did, Zeman. Yeah, it's perfect.
Matt is, for lack of a better word, he's my camera shutting off. Man, I'm all kinds of crazy today. He is
It
a
happens.
psychedelic guru, I guess we'll go with. And I'll give you the chance to define that a little bit better, because I know that that's a very basic description. So welcome to the show, Matt, and thank you for being willing to come on and talk.
Stack, I appreciate. Again, we were talking earlier. The people you are talking to with first responders, um, this is a medicine that can potentially help them, and getting the word out and helping them make an informed decision on whether these medicines are right for them or for someone they love, or just so they understand better. That's what this conversation is about. We're not trying to sell anything. We're not trying to promote anything. We just want to get information so that people can make the best decision for themselves.
So, how do you get started in this? Why do you decide that this is where you want to go?
Stack. I was a non-drug user who was invited to a guided mushroom journey, and I went into that journey with low expectations. It was completely foreign for me, and it blew my mind. I just couldn't believe how beautiful of an experience it was, how much I learned about myself, how I reconnected with this idea of anything being sacred, reconnected with my mom who died when I was 22 and she was 49. I just had insight after insight after insight in this one journey. And I left it saying, oh my goodness, what is this? And I need to know more. And I went back to school and got a master's in psychology and neuroscience, focused on mental health and more specifically focused on psychedelics within mental health. And I started traveling around trying different psychedelics from different types of practitioners. But at this point, this is part of my practice. This is something I believe wholeheartedly in, and I also believe that I can straddle these worlds between the medical and the ceremonial and help bring information to people. And again, it's all about psychedelics aren't for everyone to take. They're good for society, in my opinion. So I just want people to have the information so that they can make as an informed decision as possible for themselves.
And you mentioned it briefly. You mentioned that ketamine is legal in all 50 states, and I was lucky enough to stumble onto a show about ketamine a couple of weeks ago,
Mm.
and so maybe you and I can focus on the other classified psychedelics today, and maybe the the best spot to start is what is a psychedelic?
Yeah. So when we talk about psychedelics, we talk about a broad category of drugs that are mind or soul manifesting. So we can think about um, classic psychedelics, things like mushrooms and iboga, ayahuasca. Those are all kind of classic plant-based psychedelics. We can talk about synthetic psychedelics, things like LSD and MDMA and MDA, and there are literally hundreds of synthetic or chemical psychedelics that are out there. And then we can talk about the things like ketamine, which is not technically a psychedelic, but it is part of it. All of those things, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different molecules, are grouped under the term psychedelic.
And so, you said that 50 years ago, this narrative about this war on drugs came about and it was vilified and criminalized and they created these, the schedule one, two, and threes. And some of these drugs that we're talking about, well, most of these drugs that we're talking about were listed as schedule one with no therapeutic or medical, qu- you know, value and a highly addictive. Are psychedelics addictive?
Yeah, by and large, the answer to that is no. They are physiologically relatively safe and they are not addictive. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. Ketamine, our one legal option, has shown to be addictive in animals. And when in the recreational market, people have absolutely gotten addictive. We haven't seen that in the medical, but it's possible. Um, MDMA has had potential again for recreational, but not in the therapeutic sense. But by and large, these are actually anti-addictive medicines. And then, and when we talk about risk, because it's all tied together, it's the same question. It's all relative risk. So we have a couple thousand people a year who die of acetaminophen overdoses around the world. We have people who die of legal alcohol, legal tobacco. Um, every medicine has a risk if it's not taken with intention and in the right amount and in the right location for the right reason. What we find with psychedelics is the relative risk is low. And there's a study that I point people to by Dr. David Nutt, Imperial College London, where he said, let's forget for a minute how psychedelics or how drugs are classified. Let's put them all in a bucket. And we're just going to look at drugs for harm to self and harm to others. And he stacked them all up and they did a bunch of research. On the far left hand side of his chart is alcohol. It's a 72. And you work your way down, you go past heroin, you get to tobacco, it's like a 55. and you work your way down, and all the way at the far right hand side of the chart is mushrooms. It's a 6, and LSD is a 7, and MDMA is a 9. So, are there risks with these drugs? Absolutely. Relatively to things that are legal, there's not a lot of risk. And people should, and again, if people also are screening out for things that are contraindicated, that drives the risk down even more.
It's ironic that you mentioned alcohol's got a 72, and that's the highest thing on that list because really for first responders, that's the accepted medication. You know,
Yeah, and and first responders, I think we see that in the medical community with the front line. I think we see that in the veteran community. Um, I think we see that with retired athletes, people whose bodies have been abused over the years. Alcohol is acceptable. There's no one ever who says, "Oh, wait a minute, what do you mean we're all going out for a drink?" We're going to go alter our consciousness. We don't have that discussion in this country, but that alcohol is a drug, and it's a dangerous
yeah, it's
drug.
that one that's ridiculous because every time you say you're not drinking, people ask you why. Nobody asks you why you're not taking mushrooms, but everybody asks you why you're not drinking.
That is
I've spent
very
the
true.
last year dry, and so I know exactly every time you go out, everybody goes, "Why aren't you drinking?" It's like, it's just an experiment to see how long I can go, you know? Um,
Hmm.
so, okay, you gave a list of some of these psychedelics and you got mushrooms, MDMA, LSD, it goes on. So is there I don't know if this one's gonna make sense. Is there kind of a hierarchy of psychedelics? Is there kind of, like, an easy way in, or do they all have pluses and minuses and reasons to use them, separate from each other?
I think so. I think it's more of that there are medicines that are, and I use the term medicine when I talk about psychedelics, and I don't necessarily mean in a medicinal use, but I use that term. I think it's an easier term than
Mhm.
drug. um, I think it's one, what is the person attracted to? And a lot of times people say, like, oh, I'm feeling called to dot, dot, dot. I'm feeling called to ayahuasca. I'm feeling called to mushrooms. Okay, great. A lot of times it's just
Yeah.
access. Okay, I ran across some ability to have a guided something experience, and I want to go ahead and do that. Okay, great. That's fine too. Um, I know. I guess what I've noticed is with certain groups of people, veterans as an example, I would imagine frontline, first responders as well, that some of them really do get drawn towards the harder physical medicine. So ayahuasca is an example where there's a purging aspect, and it's an overnight ceremony typically, and it's very physical. Um, they're drawn to that. But I also have seen great success in those populations with psilocybin, and we've seen clinical trials now with MDMA, super gentle, doing incredible work for PTSD.
So let's kind of talk about each one, if you don't mind. Let's start with mushrooms because I think that's the one that people are most familiar with, and it probably has no, I'm not going to misspeak there. I was going to say it probably has the longest history, but I doubt that actually. Um, so what are these class of medicine called mushrooms? Because I know there's a variety of mushrooms out there, and they have a variety of effects.
Yeah. So when we talk about magic mushrooms here in America, we're typically talking about psilocybin mushrooms. And there's a whole bunch of different strains that deal more with the potency of them. How strong are those mushrooms? If you're going into a clinical trial, you're getting a synthetic version of the mushroom, but it it it's almost an identical experience. When people so what is the research? What are they using mushrooms to look at? They're working with people with depression, with anxiety, with PTSD, with eating disorders, with substance use challenges from alcohol to smoking. And they're finding that people are having tremendous results of having all of the negative symptoms reduced, um, and then having the efficacy, having the ability for this medicine to last is showing to be pretty powerful. So I think, yeah, to your point, psilocybin is something people can grow themselves. It is relatively easily accessed in America since they grow everywhere. Um, and people are, yeah, it's tremendous results. There are not you can take psilocybin or magic mushrooms while being on an antidepressant for the most part, and that's really nice for people who are on some other type of medication. There's not a lot of contraindications. And when I compare that to something like ayahuasca, where you can't be on an antidepressant and you really shouldn't be on any psychoactive medication, and it's very physical and it's going to increase your heart rate. It's a more challenging experience than psilocybin. And then MDMA is in some ways similar in that you really don't want to be on any stimulants, you don't want to be on any antidepressants with the MDMA. Um, but it's gentler on the body. It's less visual. You feel love for yourself and for others. Um, it turns off shame, blame, and guilt. So we're seeing here's a cool story in MDMA. I mean, they just finished phase 3 clinical trials, and they were working with people with treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorder. So nothing's worked, none of the pharmacological solutions, none of the talk therapies. And they gave them 3 sessions with MDMA and therapy before and after. And upwards of 70% left that journey without having a PTSD diagnosis anymore. That's kind of an incredible number. Yeah, super, super
Yes,
powerful.
that's an amazing number. And has that research been long enough? Has a gap been long enough to determine the efficacy and the lasting effects?
Not from that particular research, but they're feeling the lasting effects are pretty strong. What we're having now in the country, literally today, the FDA is having a discussion on this, and in August they are to vote on whether to re-legalize MDMA in America, and we're hopeful that this is going to happen, and that people will start having legal access to MDMA. It's been outlawed since like
Yeah.
'86, so we're hoping that this research was enough to get it over the line and get people to have access
Well, it's a
again.
funny note because I think it was about 85 when I was first introduced to MDMA and we didn't know what the hell it was. I was in high school at the time, and somebody goes, "It's
Hmm.
MDMA, it's ecstasy." And I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And they're like, "Just try it." And
Hmm.
I did it once and it was a great night, but I was a kid. I was 17 years old, so I didn't
Right.
understand what it was at the time. Um, but now when I think about MDMA, I'm like, "Holy shit, I never knew it had those therapeutic values to it." And we've kinda slid away from mushrooms, but let's do that. What is MDMA? What is that chemical makeup, and why does it do what you say it
Well,
does?
and I think we can combine, I mean, if we're going to talk high level, I think we can combine mushrooms, MDMA, ayahuasca, and let's just talk about how do these work on the
Okay.
brain. So, um, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to quiet down your default mode network. So, this is that inner narrator that's constantly saying, you're not enough, you're not worthy, you need to do more. That voice, it turns that down. For so many people, when that default mode network goes down, it's like the weight of the world is lifted off their shoulders. It's an incredible feeling. It's like, oh my goodness, just turn that off. It then allows neurons to fire together that might not have fired together since you were a little kid. As we get older, we literally start having repetitive thinking patterns and narrowing down our way of thinking. This is like It's like the analogy that Michael Pollan gives us is it's like you're skiing down a mountain, and as you get older, you stay in the same track over and over to the point where you forget there's a
Yeah.
rest of the slope there. The mushrooms or the ayahuasca or the MDMA puts a fresh coat of powder, and all of a sudden you're skiing across the whole mountain, and you remember, I don't have to think about this like I am. I don't have to feel this way like I do. I can feel this other way. And again, that's an incredible thing to know. It's not an intellectual exercise. No one's telling you think about this or you can do better. It's oh my god, I know I have another way I can think because I'm doing it. So that's another piece of the psychedelic process. It creates a period of neuroplasticity where your brain is able to have neurons growing and strengthening, and that's where it's a great time to introduce behavioral change. Okay, I've had this insight, and I no longer want to do X, Y, or Z, or I want to do more of this. And your brain, for like 30 days following a psychedelic, is really able to learn, um, again at a repetitive, or sorry, at a at a really strong way. It also, for many, many people, it connects with some type of sacred, whatever that is to that person. I know for me, I had no belief in any type of higher power, any of that before psychedelics, and now it's a daily part of my life. It's many, many people say, "Oh my goodness," and I'm talking like 80% will say this is, if not the number one thing, it's certainly in the top 5 things that I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And that connection reminds us that we're not alone. It reminds us of um, that we are loved, that we are worthy, and that we're enough just as we are. And that's powerful. So you put all of those things together in your brain as this happens, and yeah, and we're able to have our own insights and awarenesses, and then we enter into what's called the integration process, where we now take those insights and now how do we implement those into our life here on this planet. But the experience itself is quite beautiful and powerful.
You mentioned the neuroplasticity, and I love that you did. Obviously, with the conversation about psychedelics, you can't help but talk about neuroplasticity. But the conversation I had recently about neuroplasticity is the fact that I somebody asked me, "Why are we killing ourselves?" Because first responders,
Mm.
firefighters in general, well, firefighters specifically, first responders or frontline workers in general, have a very high suicide rate, and unfortunately, it's well known. Um, I think it's underreported as well, not only just well known, but I think some of that it hit me the other day. I went, "Well, it's not just talk therapy is not working. It doesn't always work because it's not changing that wiring." 'Cause the things that we see and the things that we experience and then, like you said, the thinking that we get in that one track that we get stuck in, talk therapy doesn't necessarily help the neuroplasticity where this class of medicine, these psychedelics, does exactly that. It rewires in a way or opens up the old wires and finds the new pathways that you can take, and I think that right there is so powerful that it has to be an option for frontline workers.
I think so, Stack. I mean, you talk about what firefighters and frontline workers see every day, every week. It's most people don't see it in their lifetime. And the ability to process that level of emotion is what we ask of them is tremendous. Um, so when we talk about like an MDMA, we talk about turning off shame, blame, and guilt and being able to see your role for what it is. Okay, I was here to do what I did, and I did everything that I could do, and this outcome was not what I would have wanted, but it was what it was. That can be freeing for some people. And again, it's not intellectual. It's not a therapist telling you, you did all you can do. You're so good. No, it's you coming to your own understanding about your own experiences and then this inner knowing that comes from that. It's not anyone else. This is I mean, that's the power of psychedelics. It's taking back your agency. I'm not relying on anybody else to tell me anything. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, I think that there's a nuance there of someone telling you, "Hey, you did everything the best you could," to your own brain going, "No, you played your part the way you played it, and it's okay." It's there's a huge difference there because that's an acceptance over just like you said, a learning or a being told.
Yeah, and it's more than okay, and it's not just that. It's understanding, okay, I wouldn't even have been in that moment if it wasn't for these 700 other moments that that occurred to get me to there.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was very challenging, and this is a bigger way to look at it.
It's fascinating. It truly is. And you mentioned a spirituality that came from it for you. Um, did you identify yourself as atheist or agnostic or something when you went into something, or did you not identify? You just didn't have it.
For me, my mom died. I lost my grandmother, my father, my mother, all within a few
Yeah.
years when I was young. And I was like, there's no way there's anything that would allow this to happen. Um, and it's so tricky, Stack, to talk about religion and spirituality because it comes with so much
Yes.
baggage for so many people. And the church, the institution, has done so much harm to so many people. So I when I talk about this, I'm careful to say I'm not talking about the teachings about a higher power. I'm talking about teachings from these higher powers. I'm talking about what I've learned for myself. And it has been amazing to find this power inside of me and to realize that we're not separate from each other. We are all interconnected. I'm not apart from nature. I am nature. And to know that it's been incredible. I think I was leading a pretty lonely life before this, where I felt very isolated. Even being married, even having kids, even friends, it's just different now. It's I don't feel alone.
What is ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca is two different vines that are boiled down into a tea. And in Central and South America and Hawaii, the indigenous communities have used this tea as part of their ceremonies for 1,000 plus years. And when the active ingredient is
Mm.
DMT. So when you drink DMT through ayahuasca, it's a solid 6, 8 hour journey. It's intense and it's and it's long and it's powerful. And many times when you experience ayahuasca, the organization or facilitator or retreat or wherever you're going is probably going to have you do it 2, 3, 4 times over a week. Mm. So it's grueling to do that. DMT you can also inhale, and when you inhale DMT, it's a 10 to 20
Okay.
minute psychedelic experience. So still very visual, still very intense, but not the same. It doesn't make you purge, but it also doesn't give you the I don't believe it gives me, let me try it for me. It doesn't give me the intense learnings that ayahuasca gives me. It's beautiful, just different.
Yeah, that's when you said, and this is how much of a novice I suppose I am, that I did not realize it was this is kind of that same vein as DMT. And then when
Mhm.
you said it was a 6 to 8 hour like journey, in my head I had already gone to, but wait a second, when you smoke DMT, it's a 10 to 20 minute, it's a flash, right? And it's almost
Mhm.
like a jarring flash into it and a jarring flash out, is what I've been told. I've never done DMT, but that's the report I've
Mhm.
gotten. Um, and so is it it's simply just that delivery system changes it that much?
Yeah, and when you drink it, it's going in, it's entering your body in a different manner, and it is yeah, and it stays with you a lot longer than the and going through the lungs and in that vaporized form. It's completely different. I think for people who are trying to do trauma work, the ayahuasca at this point, I'm saying ayahuasca is probably the um better way to go, but I don't know. There have been people who've had incredibly profound DMT experiences and can get a lot out of a 10 to 20 minute DMT experience. It is like a rocket ship. So with DMT, when you inhale it, literally you're inhaling it and they're going to kind of push you back. And by the time they count to 10, like an anesthesia, boom, you're
Right.
gone. With ayahuasca, you're going to go up to the taita or the shaman and you're going to drink your cup and go back to your mat. Could be an hour, could be an hour and a half before the medicine
Yeah.
comes on. For me, it's sometimes, yeah, sometimes an hour and a half, but then when it comes and then you feel the ayahuasca kind of reaching around you and pulling you into the ground, it's this really, for me, a loving, beautiful embrace that then brings me into this whole other world that I love. I love staying in there and seeing how much I can learn during that period.
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show. And you mentioned a purge. Is that the physical purge?
It is typically with ayahuasca. Many people, not everybody, most people have they're one way or the other. They're
Yeah.
purging. This is something that I'm kind of a wuss with this stuff, Stack. I remember the first time I really don't like to throw up, and the Taita's wife said to me, "You're gonna find that's the most beautiful part." I was like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna find that." She was right. It was for me when I purged. Every time I purged, there's a message in the bucket. Now, wow, that is
Huh.
wild. I did not even know that was possible. But it is possible. But just and again, I know how woo woo that
Yeah.
sounds. So if you're still listening to this, I know it sounds woo woo. Um, but these medicines, it is it. I mean, this goes back kind of where the Stack was starting this discussion. These have been used for thousands of years across the world. There are there are cave paintings in Africa that are 5, 6, 7,000 years old of mushroom shaman. There are Siberian shaman. There are witches burned all throughout Europe. There are the Greeks using psychedelics. In India, they were using psychedelics. In China, they were using psychedelics. Certainly in Central America, South America, North America. So I say this because every single person has a psychedelic
Yeah.
lineage. It's not just for the native people. Although theirs is beautiful and closer to where we all have one. And these medicines have been used for a long time by a number of communities to do this type of healing. Back in the days before we only had healer, and the healer was a medical healer and a spiritual healer. And we in Western society have separated those roles. And we've said, okay, pure science gets to be medicine and pure spirit gets to be the clergy. Well, these tools work in both camps. We know that whether you're a doctor or a shaman, if you give somebody 5 grams of mushrooms, they're probably going to have a spiritual experience. And in my opinion, we need more collaboration between spiritual and medical to help deliver these medicines to be as effective as they can be. And to do that, we need to bring all of this above ground. And that's what I'm hoping is happening in our country. That whether it's decriminalization, whether it's a religious freedom movement, whether it's the medical movement, all of this comes above ground, so we can have more discussions like you and I are having right now, Stack.
So what is well, what is the proper term? Iboga or ibogaine?
It's 2 different
Oh,
things. Iboga is the root that comes out of, Africa. The Bwiti, community uses it in sacred ceremonies. Ibogaine is the extract, that is used in more of a medical model, for it. So, super powerful. This one is a little different than the other psychedelics we've talked about. So why is this different? This journey can be 24 hours. It can be a long trip. This particular medicine has cardiac risk. So if you're going to go do an ibogaine experience, like getting an EKG and really making sure you have medical professionals or people who know what they're doing nearby, it is important. And what we're seeing, at least in some initial studies, is for people with like an opioid addiction. This is incredible. It can help people knock it very very quickly. So, yeah, a little bit different, also very strong. Again, like we're talking about long, long, long journeys. So it's not taken lightly. But I also, if I had someone struggling with an opioid challenge, there's no question I would find them an Ibogaine clinic.
I think the first place I heard about ibogaine was with the Bell brothers, and I'm not sure if you know the history there or not. It was kind of a well known story back. I don't know. I mean, it's been years now, I believe, but they struggled with some addiction and some physical pain, and the claim is that the
Yeah.
physical pain was healed as well when they went through their journey. And is there truth to that? Is that what people are finding?
There are studies, there's a lot of studies. It's not my area of expertise, but there are definitely studies being done on physical pain, everything from chronic headaches to back injuries. And they are having very promising results. We know that there's some anti-inflammatory properties to these medicines, and that could be part of the reason. Part of it could be so much of our pain is psychosomatic, and that we're able to heal ourselves from the inside and make some
Yeah.
of those pains go away. Um, yeah, and I think I mean it's right now there's over 300 academic institutions studying the power of psychedelics for a range of things. 300. So it's what an amazing time to be alive and let these researchers come and prove what the indigenous healers have been using for years. And hopefully this again provides more tools for people who are suffering to use. And that's, I think, is the name of the game here. We know antidepressants only work for a certain amount of the population. We know they take a long time to figure out if they work for you. We know they're really hard to get off. We know they come with incredible side effects, from weight gain to lethargy to suicidal ideation to sexual dysfunction. We don't have those side effects with these psychedelics. So hopefully, we're going to be able to start introducing these earlier on in the process and not making people suffer through these existing pharmacological solutions and people before they can try one of these, or force them to fly. I mean, it makes me really sad that we've had over 30. I'm going to talk with the veterans. I'm working on a book right now called The Veterans Guide to Psychedelics. We've had over 30,000 veterans take their lives since 9/11. It's 4 times the amount who have died in combat. And we're forcing them to fly to Central America and South America to get help because nothing here is working for them.
Yeah.
I love that Oregon has just started opening up for veterans. I know Heroic Hearts Project has taken 2 cohorts up there. It's just time for more options for the people we're asking to put into harm's way to have more tools that they can try to see what works for them. And I feel the exact same way about your firefighters and your first responders.
So how do we break down these barriers? How do we break down, again, we talk about it on this show a lot about a stigma about mental health, but this is a stigma about medicine for the mental health. So how do we start to knock that down and get past that?
I think by doing exactly what we're doing now, we start having conversations like this where we say, "Hey, I was struggling and I used this, and so and so is using this particular tool, and here's the reality behind these tools. It's not going to fry your brain. It's not going to get you addicted. It's not carrying high risk to do these medicines, again, with proper screening, with the right people, in the right controlled environment." We have these conversations more often, and we normalize the conversation. Meanwhile, we are also talking with our government representatives of every level, at the city level, the state level, at the federal level, and we're talking about the power of these medicines to transform lives, to stop people from killing themselves, and we get them on board. And meanwhile, we allow the academics to keep doing the research projects that they're doing, so they can keep coming back to us and saying, "Hey, here's some latest knowledge about this, that, or the other thing. You can incorporate it." And we encourage our churches to get exemptions from our government so that they can practice legally. And we help the decrim nature movement work across the country. We do all of it. And we do whatever piece of it that we can individually do, and encourage all of it to happen. There's no ors, there's no camps. It's an and. It's all an and. Um, and we're watching. It's happening as we speak. We are alive during this reformation on the medical, on the religious decrim.
I, this is going to be, I think I know how you're going to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Um, how does somebody who is now listening and goes, "Oh, all right, I see that this is coming about. This is going to be available, or this is available." And in like a perfect world, where would somebody start? Where would somebody go? I want to get started on this journey, and I want to find what Matt just talked about. What that feeling, that world where you say that you like to be, and you kind of almost luxuriate in, right? And you find your way and you find your meaning. Where do we start?
Again, incredibly personal
Right.
discussion. If I'm worried about being drug tested, I I probably need to start with ketamine, or I need to start in a state where there's a medical model for some of these other different psychedelics, or get myself into a clinical trial. And there's clinical trials happening all over the country with psychedelics. If many drug panels aren't looking for psilocybin, um, so another thing to do is to look for a psychedelic society near me and start having discussions about who is practicing in my area that is safe. How are they doing it? And how do we know they're safe? And getting some references and all of that good stuff. Or traveling and doing a psychedelic retreat in Central America, South America, Jamaica, the Netherlands. I mean, lots of options. Mexico for these types of retreats. There are 200 to 2,000. We don't know the number, and it's kind of that big of
Hmm.
a range. We're guessing, of psychedelic churches in America. So again, that's when you talk with your neighborhood people about who's practicing. Maybe it's a church model that speaks to you. I don't need therapy. I have a therapist, or I don't want to go to therapist. I want ceremony where I can do my own work and be part of a community. All right. Look around for a psychedelic church then, or a community, whatever language you're comfortable with. That probably exists. There are underground providers and individual practitioners. You can fly to Oregon, and there are treatment centers that you can go right in, and it's legal there. And then again, just be aware of when you go back to wherever it is you're from, do they test? And if they do, is whatever you did in that panel. But Oregon has some beautiful options now. I know there, I mean, again, Heroic Hearts took two different cohorts of veterans out there, and can't say enough good things about that, about their experience in Oregon. Um, and there is a non-medicine option that I will just bring up so people hear it here, which is called holotropic breathwork. And if you have, this is a specific type of breathwork developed by Dr. Stanislav Grof. When the psychedelic industry closed down and the research closed down, he went and developed this type of breathwork, and it's super intense. And you can absolutely achieve a non-ordinary state of consciousness with this breathwork. And for some people, I know there's some firefighters in Arizona, as an example, who I know do this twice a month. It's a powerful way to achieve this without using medicine. And maybe for people who aren't comfortable with the psychedelic, that's a good place to start. Wim Hof breathing is another place to start. So there are other non-medicine ways that might work for you, and then there's these medicine ways that exist.
What are general contraindications?
Typically, they wouldn't apply to people who have jobs like firefighter. Like, so if you're schizophrenic and you don't have a good grasp of this world, traveling into the psychedelic world is probably not a good idea. If you are bipolar, there's not a lot of research for you, but the underground community, the citizen scientists will say, as long as you're not in active state of mania, these might do you some good. The contraindications that I think about are more related to prescriptions and supplements that could interact with the medicine. So I tell people all the time, there's a great site, spiritpharmacist.com, which is Dr. Ben Malcolm. He just does medical intakes. So he has nothing to sell you. He's not trying to sell you a ketamine package or a retreat. He just wants to give you information. So if you go to his site and you fill out his form and you tell him, this is my age and my body type and my prescriptions and supplements and mental health and physical health, he'll have a consult with you and say, here are the risks you should know about for the different types of medicines you're thinking about doing. Dr. Emily Coppa does a similar service. A lot of our own medical professionals just aren't psychedelic
Yeah.
informed. So what I like about Ben and Emily is that they are, and they can say, oh, okay, based on you're taking a lot of Adderall. Well, okay, for that, just lay off of it for X amount of time, and then you can do this particular medicine. Or you're on an antidepressant, you have a good probability of it working with this, but maybe you need a higher dose. And again, they can get very specific and down to, oh, you're in chemo and you want to do this. Well, then you need to schedule on this day following the chemo, so you have this many days of good days before you have to go back. I mean, they're super specific, and they've been around long enough that they've seen a lot with these psychedelics.
When you had your first journey, did you do that on your own or was it a guided journey?
It was a guided, so it was a group of people and a guide, and yeah, I mean, going back to Dr. Groff, he said, "Hey, can let me try it this way. Anybody can if I give you a
Mhm.
guitar and you don't know how to play it, and you can probably make some music come out of that guitar.
Yeah.
If you give it to somebody who really knows how to play it, they can take us all on a journey. The same thing is very true of
Mhm.
psychedelics. Anybody can take a psychedelic and can occasion some type of fantastic experience. That experience might be more challenging, it might be hard, it might be a lot of things if you don't have someone there who can help keep you safe. And your body also knows, oh my goodness, I need at some level to be careful here, versus when you have a guide or a facilitator or a shaman or a taita. Okay, I'm in good shape here. I can keep my, they're going to watch over me. And if I get into a loop and I get really scared, they have techniques to move me through that so I can keep doing my work in as safe of an experience as possible. Stack, if you don't mind, let's stick on this for
Yeah.
just a moment and talk about what does the research say for how do you keep yourself as safe as possible, risk reduced. And they say, look, if you pay attention to three S's, your source, your set, and your setting, you have the probability of having a truly bad trip is very low. So source is, where did your medicine come from? Are you working with pure whatever it is, or did you buy this on Instagram and you don't know what it is? If you do if you do medical, it came from a pharmacy. Okay, great. Anything else you need to ask? How often do you get your drugs tested? Do you work with these every day? Is this a part-time thing for you? Tell me more about where the medicine came from. Set is your mindset. Why are you doing psychedelics now? Did someone help you set your intention? Did someone help you gather all the places in your life that are supportive of you so that when you go home afterwards, you know where that support structure is? Um, did they give you an informed consent that nobody's going to touch you or talk to you or whatever the rules are? Do you know that's going to be this case? Did they tell you how long this medicine's going to last in your body? Those types of things all relate to your mindset. And then your setting is that physical environment. Do they have control over the music and the lights? And are there going to be kids and dogs and Amazon people and neighbors interrupting you? Or do you have control over that environment? Do you know the people around you are safe? Though again, when you take these medicines, you're incredibly vulnerable. So really being in a supportive environment is critical to a good outcome. With source set and setting being paid attention to, you can then journey deep, deep, deep within and for whatever reason that brought you to that situation.
I'm glad you went there because the next question was on the tip of my tongue was, does how much would the mood you're in affect that trip you take? And that you kind of addressed that in mindset, but I is that true that like, so if you go in and you're just having it's been a shit day or whatever, and you're still going to go follow through with taking a dose of shrooms, does that play into your trip then? That your journey? Then okay, you've already kind of set yourself onto a path of kind of a negativity.
So the same person with the same drug and the same dose on two different days can have two wildly
Yeah.
different experiences. So in theory, sure, every day is different. And I think this is part of having a good guide. Let me just speak in the first. When we do ceremonies, when I do ceremony, no matter what, we're going to slow things down. Let's stop. Let's do some breath work. Let's do some yoga. Let's do some meditation first before we even think about touching a medicine. Let's reset the day. Let's reset the breathing. Let's pay attention to this inner breath. Now, let's go ahead and enter ceremony space and have whatever medicine we're having, and then trust that the guide and the musicians, and in our case we use live musicians, but maybe it's recorded music, doesn't make a difference, that they're going to guide you through that place so they can help reset the minutia of the day back into the bigger what's going on in my life. And but yeah, you're I didn't sleep well the night before. That plays a role. Might not be a bad role. Bad's probably not even the right word. It plays a role. It all plays a role. But most of us who are doing psychedelics, it's not because of something that happened today or yesterday. It's we're being drawn to it because of things that have happened over the last 30 or 40 years. And we want to look at that.
What about this world of some people have these memories that are just repressed, or they have these blocks of time that they're not recalling, if say from childhood or from young adulthood or whatever. You've repressed these memories, and there's a fear there that, and I don't want to take that step. Is that a legitimate fear?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't know what the medicine's going to bring up. Um, and I'll give an example. So you read it in my book. I had as an early teenager, I had some inappropriate sexual contact with a family member 10 plus years older. And this was something I never talked about. Deep, deep, deep buried within. And when you go into these experiences, you set your intentions. This is certainly not an intention that I set. I didn't feel I wanted to look at it. And it's not that I forgot about it, but it was buried deep. And in a journey, boom, I'm back in that room. And when that happens, again, what we're taught is instead of trying to run away from whatever you don't like, you see a dragon, you have to explore it with wild curiosity. And in that time, I was able to look at that and say, okay, I don't have to forgive or I don't have to condone the behavior, but I can understand the humanity. I could understand this was a person who felt rejected, who was needing love, who um, acting badly, but I could understand what the motivation was in a way that I never could before. And that allowed me also to say, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't the adult in the room. Oh, wait a minute, this isn't about fault. This is what am I carrying forward? Carrying this emotional baggage forward, and I could let it go. Um, if you're aware enough to know, oh, I've had this experience, I don't want that experience to come back up. I guess I would ask, why are you, why with the psychedelics at all?
Right.
And then if you're not aware, I don't know what the experience is, but I'm worried that there is some experience or something. Well, when you're ready for that potential to come back up, to work at what is the source of my depression? What's the source of my anxiety? What's the source of my social uncomfortableness? What is the source of my loneliness? What is the source of these patterns that manifest as substance use, whether it's drinking or nicotine or an ability to hold relationships? What is the source and the root of that? Well, that's where the medicine ideally is getting you to, so that you can see it, you can process it, and you can move on. Um, and until you're enthusiastic about doing this type of work, I recommend you don't. Um, it's not, again, it's not for everybody. And you don't do this work for your partner. You don't do this work for your parents. You do this work for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. You do this work for yourself and you do this work when you're ready to do it.
Mhm. And whenever that is, and there's no rush.
Any parting words on psychedelics? Because I know you said you have about an hour today, and so I have a couple more questions I want to hit you with, but have
No, do I mean, this is, it is finding the right provider and having trust that that person is going to keep you safe in whatever environment, whether it's saying the exact same thing is true, I guess, of medical. There are medical providers who believe this is just a biochemical reaction. You're going to go into their clinic and they're going to put an IV in your arm, and they're going to take your vitals, and they're going to send you on a journey. They're going to send you home. And there are other medical providers who believe it's a biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual experience. And they're going to talk about intentions, and they're going to make sure you're in a comfortable environment. They're going to give you music and an eye mask and a blanket, and they're going to help afterwards unpack. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but they're different. And knowing what you want and what you're looking for helps you find it, whether it's that model for medical, or I want to find a church. Well, what kind of church? What kind of psychedelic church? What do they believe in? What do they not believe in? Or an underground provider or a retreat? What kind of retreat? Same questions are really across the board for all of them. And it's, again, not that one is right or wrong. It's what do you want and how do you get that?
I wanna make sure that we talk about your book, The Psychedelics for Everyone, and then you have the journal as well, correct?
I do. Beyond the Trip is the
And
journal.
what does the journal entail?
The journals, okay, you've now found your medicine. And how do you help prepare? There are activities for all your preparation process. There's a middle section then right after each journey. It's where you can take down your notes about what happened so you can memorialize it and help solidify the experience. And then there's 4 weeks of activities after the ceremony, where each week there's an exercise, there's a gratitude journal each day, there's some creative things to do. And again, it just helps you take advantage of that 30 days following the psychedelic experience to actualize what's come up in your mind. And then coming this September will be the Veterans Guide to Psychedelics, which is a preparation and integration journal specifically for veterans.
That one, I'm fascinated to read that one. That'll be a good one.
I'm super excited. All the proceeds go to Heroic Hearts
Okay.
Project. Ken Weingart is a PhD who's done the clinical review on it, and yeah, it's going to be a
Where
great
can
book.
everybody find you, Matt?
MattZemon.com is my site. There's a guide to microdosing. There's a bunch of little videos. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. And my books are anywhere books are sold. And there's audible version of Psychedelics for Everyone.
And my last 2 questions that I ask every guest, and I think the first one might be pretty easy for you. Actually, they're both pretty easy for you, but, I like to ask everybody about a moment of awe. When's the last time
Mhm.
or significant time you had a moment of awe in your life?
I am so thankful to be able to say, wow, I've got a bunch to choose from, but I'm going to do the last psychedelic experience where I had the opportunity to die and turn into dirt, worm food, and I could feel that whole transition into death. And then I had the ability to breathe and to recognize, oh my goodness, of all the trillions upon trillions and trillions of things of accidents that had to happen for me to be allowed to breathe today in this world, on this planet, in this form. Oh my goodness, how lucky am I? And I've been able to carry that all over breath and just as long as I'm breathing, this is amazing, amazing. And yeah, I have just complete awe for life since that experience.
And that kind of brings up the idea of psychedelics for terminal patients and that acceptance
Mm.
of death and how it does kind of lead to them coming to this, like I said, an acceptance of death. It almost comforts them in the knowledge that death is coming.
It does comfort them, and we're seeing beautiful work, Johns Hopkins, Yale, UCSF, I think Imperial College London on people who've gotten terminal diagnoses. Um, it doesn't change the fact that they're gonna die, it changes the quality of life while they're here. And look, that's the medical world, incredible, and then they're finding this it happens quickly, I mean, within hours, and it lasts. What I'm also seeing in the ceremonial world is when we give psychedelics then to the friends and family that are bearing witness to the person dying. Well, now we have communication that needs to happen, healing that needs to happen, love that can happen back and forth, forgiveness that can happen back and forth, and it's and understanding that can happen back and forth. And it's beautiful. So I'm a huge fan of psychedelics in the entire world of end of life care for the families and for the person actively dying.
So outside of the books that we've mentioned that you have, the psychedelics for everyone, the journal, and then the upcoming one for veterans, what's a book that you would suggest to the audience to read, whether it's on psychedelics or not? Is there a book that would bring value to my audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael Pollan's book on how to change your mind is so easily accessible. And if you're not a big reader, his Netflix series, there's 4 one-hour episodes. I think that's a great place to start. I also think Dr. Carl Hart's Drug Use for Grown-ups is awesome. Um, yeah, he's a good
Yeah.
writer, but he's a specialist in addiction, and he has a very candid and unique perspective on all things
Yeah,
drugs.
that was a phenomenal read. I loved Dr. Hart's book. It kind of humanizes every drug in a way.
And he says, "I'm a father, I'm a taxpayer, I'm a professor, I'm a husband, and sometimes I do drugs, and here's why, and here's why the information that you have is probably inaccurate."
Yeah, and to think that this guy not only does he do drugs, but, you mentioned, like, these drugs that everybody goes, "Oh my god, I never think about it," and this is a professor, I believe it's Columbia, correct? Yeah,
It is, yep.
and
Mhm.
he openly professes to having used heroin, and there's situations where heroin helps him in his performance when he presents, and it's not it's the day or 2 after it that helps him, and he presents in such a way that you've come away going, "Oh, I get it now. That makes sense."
Yeah,
So
and yeah, and he's done really interesting experiments around this, and his understanding of the flywheel between government has an initiative, academia supports that position, people are hired to write to that based on that theory. The newspapers report it, the police enforce it,
mm,
the public believes it, and
yeah,
round we go. And 50 years later, here we
yeah.
are.
Well, hopefully, we're on the road to changing a lot of that.
We
So,
are. We are. We get to see it in our lifetime, Stack.
well, Matt, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I think I'm getting you out of here in just under an hour, so I did my
Oh, it's
job.
perfect.
So,
Yeah, you did a great job, and I appreciate this. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate it for this audience. This is really important. And if you're still listening to this and you've been listening for an hour, if I can be of support, go to my website, drop me a line. I'll write you back, and we can schedule you in a call. But this is what you do out there is important, and and this is potentially another tool for
awesome.
you.
Thank you very much, sir. Go enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll
Thank
talk
you,
at
my
another
friend.
point in
Appreciate
time.
it. That sounds
Awesome.
good.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.